Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by Mug.News. Scott Henderson is an ecosystem builder that has worked with upstart communities across the U.S., like Atlanta, Baton Rouge, Indiana, and now Lincoln. He is the owner of CoShift, a strategic advisor of startup companies, and a managing director of NMotion. Scott, with a busy schedule, I'm sure you are quite taken, so I'm so glad you were able to come on the show today.
Absolutely. Love being here.
Of course. So my first question for you is, how did you first become involved in the startup communities you helped build, like the ones I covered in the intro?
That's a great question. I think it was because someone needed to do something. I think that's entrepreneurship in many ways, whatever flavor entrepreneurship that you come across. I believe it's just people seeing problems that need to be solved and say, why can't I solve that? Well, let me go solve that and figure it out. And I think the entrepreneur mindset isn't just about the tech startup scene. It's the mom and pop shops. It's the nonprofit sector. It's the government sector. It's people who are seeing problems around them and just go and build those solutions. So I think the way I got involved, Caitlin, was the fact that it looked like that's the place I needed to be, and I could do something to make a difference.
Absolutely. And we mentioned this a little bit off screen before we got started. So did you get some inspiration from some of your family members who owned their own kind of companies, businesses?
Yeah, it's funny because it's really only in hindsight that I consider that question, because growing up, my father and grandfather, my father and his father were psychiatrists and owned their own practices. So they were business owners in the era when being a doctor was about being solo practitioners or partnerships before the big medical companies came along. So that was the golden age of physician entrepreneurs. My mom's side, my mom's mom was a home-based entrepreneur. She was always crafting, always sewing, but also had her own beauty parlor in her house. So there's that. And my mom was also a cosmetologist and would make money by having people. I remember as a kid growing up and smelling permanents happening in the house, which you knew those were the nights not to be there. But my mom also, she's always creating, crafting, quilting. She ran when I was a kid, our house would be taken over by a boutique, right? So all these crafters would come in and bring their stuff in, and we'd stage the entire house as a shop, and it was a big deal. And then my mom ended up running the church boutique. So yeah, there's always been this economic energy that's been going on in the family, but it wasn't like anyone walked around saying, "Hey, we're entrepreneurs," or "We're startup founders." It was just you had to make money, and this is how we did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always like to ask entrepreneurs' opinions and ecosystems opinions on dialogue is constantly changing, and the definitions that we apply to certain words is constantly shifting. I'm sure you've experienced that by the way you've mentioned the history of they didn't know they were entrepreneurs until they were. So.
Yeah, it's funny. The word entrepreneur can trip people up because and founder. Some people don't want to be associated with being an entrepreneur because they think of kind of negative media connotations towards it, right? So I think really just looking at it, and that's where I've been very deep in the Gallup organization's work on entrepreneurship, and I like the word builder that they've got. This idea of we're building something, right? So we're all builders to some degree, and we have different builder strengths and builder talents, and I think that's really, when you get down to it, I think that's, if you look at, and that's in hindsight, I look at what was I doing? I was in the nonprofit world. I was creating things when I was a kid, creating clubs. I was creating, events and activities. And it's just exciting to create stuff where money flows in, pays for something, people experience it, and they go out. So I think, if you talk about ecosystem builders, that's an interesting term to it. The ecosystem itself, you can break it down, and that has its own confusion around it, but it's really, how are we looking at things within an entire community, right? And how does this piece of the puzzle connect to that? And if we see it really as watersheds or as these meta-organisms being involved in a community and helping make that community stronger ecosystem building. I mean, it's building, and being an entrepreneur is saying, hey, I see a problem. Let me go find a solution. And then I get to reap the benefit of what's called profit based on me solving that problem. And that's actually something where I kind of stumbled upon realizing that I was an entrepreneur. I was working in the University of Nebraska Foundation, raising money for the College of Medicine, College of Nursing. And I was going through the University of Nebraska Omaha MBA program at night. And so I was learning about business and I was learning about running companies. But really what was interesting was our foundation offices were across the street from a discount brokerage called Oldie Discount Brokerage. And they had these beautiful double-sided desks. They're called partner desks with glass tops. And it was dark cherry stained wood. And it was like an exotic smelling wood. One day they got bought out by H&R Block. So they redecorated the whole office. And so one day we shared the common space with our neighbors at Oldie, now H&R Block. And I asked one of the brokers, I said, so whatever happened to this nice desk? I'd love to have one of those desks. And he goes, well, you can have one, but you got to buy all 20 of them. And I said, whoa, all right. Well, so he said it's down at a warehouse in downtown Omaha. It's clearance. I'll let you know. Here's how you go look at it. So I go back into my offices, and there was two of my coworkers, and they had adult kids at the time. And I said, hey, guys, remember this desk? I was totally joking. You remember this desk? Hey, we can buy them. If you want to go in on this with me, we can go buy them. We can split them up. And the two ladies looked at each other and goes, yeah, sure, we're in. I was like, oh, okay. Well, so I went down, found out that the price they was asking was just ridiculously cheap. I figured out how to get them delivered to my house, and for my two partners now to take their portions. And then I was in it was late 90s. So early days of online advertising, posted an online ad, spread the word of mouth, sold the desk, made enough money to pay off my washer and dryer I just bought, and realized, I think I want to do that more often. So that was the moment that I realized I'm an entrepreneur. I don't need any degrees to tell me that. I know this is what I want. I can do that.
Mm-hmm. No, you have definitely built those skills over time. And you'd mentioned even when you were younger, you'd made those clubs. Do you mind if I ask what kind of clubs that you?
Well, I mean, we like neighborhood clubs. We were called the Ferocious Ones. We created our own treehouse. And then in high school, I was in Latin. And the Latin club really was a non-existent. Somebody was running it. So we actually, using Roman history, we staged insurrection and took over the Latin club. It was the secret revolutionary triumvirate that led that, and then ran, and we became president the next year, and that became our vehicle. Then I got involved in college in my fraternity and leading that on recruiting and then being president and just doing fun stuff like that. So those are the kind of clubs and associations. And I also, when I was in high school, my grandfather owned land in Weeping Water, Nebraska. And it was old tree stands. He planted a lot of black walnut trees. And so he and I would go to the Walnut Council national meetings every year. And so I actually in high school started the chapter here in Nebraska, the Nebraska chapter of the Walnut Council. So I just was doing it. I just got people together and figured out how do you communicate. And then when I graduated college, I was very involved with my fraternity alumni association and reaching out and raising money and doing stuff like that. So I don't know. I've always enjoyed connecting people.
And that's why you are such a successful ecosystem builder. So then my second question was, what is one thing that people wouldn't know if they started like joining your ecosystem communities? What's one thing they wouldn't know about your ecosystem community?
Well, it's interesting is having spent a lot of time in Boston and Cambridge. At the time, I was very involved I was on the launch team for Startup America Partnership, which was the private sector effort that was co-led by the Kauffman Foundation and the Case Foundation as a response to the Obama administration's Startup America, which was reducing barriers. Startup America Partnership was raising expectations, right? And so this is back in 2002, 2011 timeframe. So we're in the smoldering ruins of the financial crisis of 08, 09. And really it was a call to, hey, let's expect more out of ourselves. You know, we are each city, each region better. So what I realized from the get-go, like looking across the entire nation, every ecosystem's different on the surface, but on the basis, there's similar principles that have to come into place. And I think most people don't realize that it's really about finding those who care. I have a mantra that I learned in fundraising, but I also brought in ecosystem building, is the number one thing that most people need to understand is not everyone cares. Not everyone cares, right? So even though you're most passionate about something, you want to create something, this is an amazing community, not everyone cares about that. And it's hard for most people to overcome that. But once you overcome with that, you mourn that, you say, okay, I'm fine with that. Not everyone cares, but you can take heart because somebody cares. So the key is finding the somebodies that care about what you're trying to create, or the vision or the outcome that you're trying to create. And then giving them the tools, because the somebodies know others. They know others in their network who, if they're given easy tools and easy ways to plug people in, they can bring those others in. And now your somebodies are a lot larger. So now the people that care is a lot larger. So I think the thing that most people don't realize is not that you have to reach everybody. It's you just have to find the somebodies, make it easier for them to find the others. And then all of a sudden you've got a really nice group of critical mass of people who really want to come together as a community.
Right. So I'm quite a visual person. And as I'm listening to you, it sounds very much like you're creating a web of individuals and those connections are just continuing to fan out. Would you say that's kind of how your experience has been, or do you have a different?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. If you look at human beings, we are social creatures through and through. As a species, that's our human. Augustine, I can't remember his last name. There's a gentleman who's a anthropologist and anthrobiologist, and I was listening to an interview that he was giving, and he talked about this fact that that's our human niche, that we are social through and through. And the other thing too is that if you look at that, that means that there are natural connections, and that was coming out into the world of my professional life. Started in major gift fundraising and capital campaigns. And that's a lot of this has informed my behaviors, because there's a lot of people. There's insights that I got from that is that people already have existing connections and networks. These webs are all around us. Networks and communities are all over. And it's understanding that a small percentage of people, there's a power law, the Pareto's principle, that 20% of things determine 80% of the outcomes, right? So 20% of these people and relationships are really able to influence the other 80. And that was part of my fascination through my college and my MBA program was on human behaviors in groups. Some of my favorite classes was about that. And it was eye-opening to me, having been very involved in leadership of organizations and realizing you don't need 100% of the people to agree with you. You don't even need 51%. What you need is 8 or 10 people who have relationships of people that they can influence. Because that's, in the end of the day, you and I have a circle of friends that listen to us and we can influence, and vice versa. So it's just a matter of figuring out who are those people that have really strong connections and status that they can actually get other people to do stuff because of that. So yes, it is about webs. It's about creating stronger connections between that. Our brains are networked together. Relationships are about connections and value exchange. And so yes, absolutely. This is about a web. This is about density of, and that was the other thing I realized is density is destiny. And this is in terms of ecosystem building and community building. Density is destiny. And what I mean is not physical density by itself. I'm talking about density of shared experiences. And that can come through physical space, that can through the media that you consume or create. Could also be the events that you attend, right? So those are the 3 levers that every ecosystem, every community has: physical spaces, events, and media. And based on what, that triangle, that base of the pyramid, you leverage the strengths of the ecosystem. And so if you can create a density of shared experiences, either through the physical spaces, through the media you're creating, like this podcast here, and then events that people can go to, that creates the opportunity and environment for people to have those interactions that spark trust. And ultimately, it's trust that matters, because you get these density of shared experiences. It gives you a chance to have serendipity, to have these interactions, to do stuff together. And once people can make those connections and then develop deeper bonds, that's where trust comes into play. And that's the currency of any ecosystem, is how much trust is embedded into it.
Mm-hmm. What an in-depth answer. Like, it's very fascinating to hear your perspective on everything and your experiences through it. There are some huge nuggets that I know our listeners can, and I know I can take away from that. So thank you very much. And so my next question was, in those communities that you helped build, are people eligible for any local grants or interest-free loans that they can help build their business on?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know that you here in Lincoln that you've already interviewed the most important person, who's Christina Oldfather. She's doing an amazing amount of work here. The Lincoln Partnership Economic Development, the Lincoln Chamber is really cutting new ground for people to follow. So definitely listen to that episode if you haven't. Look at what Lincoln LPED and Lincoln Chamber have done. State of Nebraska, absolutely doing great stuff. Grants that are, prototype grants is a very powerful grant the state of Nebraska has. Startup Lincoln has a really great grant for startups themselves. So Lincoln, I'm very excited being here because of the stuff. My role, when you introduced me with Cost Shift has been kind of a vehicle in my entire career. But my main focus is NMotion startup, the Accelerator Studio. It's a program that Generator runs in partnership with the local folks that created it. And I can tell you, the appeal of coming here to Lincoln was mainly because of these grants that were part of a portfolio of other assets. The partners behind it, the companies that are part of this, the people behind creating this. So those grants were part of this entire portfolio by themselves. I mean, that portfolio was very important to me, especially having companies that have come through NMotion since its creation. And we just had a major exit with Quantified Ag. We have a couple different companies that are on that pathway to follow Quantified Ag for some great success. We've got other great companies in Lincoln. So yes, I think your specific question around grants, for sure. When I was in Atlanta, they had the city of Atlanta and state of Georgia had a lot of grants and tax incentives that around angel investors, as well as giving, reducing the barriers of government in the state of Georgia. But each one's different. Like Indiana does great work around different clusters of technology. They put together an entire cooperative collective called the Wabash Heartland Innovation Institute that's focused on industrial and agriculture applications of Internet of Things and 5G. They've created entire test beds as well as rural innovation cooperatives to allow for startups to bring their technologies to farmers and producers who don't have big budgets, and they mitigate that risk. So government plays a big role in every community I've been part of. They know that there's grants, there's tax incentives, but a lot of it is also how can I reduce the friction in that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just curious, going off script a little bit, what brought you to all of the different cities because you've made a huge contribution to every single city that you've gone to after doing some research on you. So I was wondering, was it those relationships, were you brought to those places based on the relationships that you've talked about, that quantity or quality versus the quantity?
Yeah, I was asked that as I was going through the interview process for the NMotion Accelerator Studio Managing Director role that I have now. And I can tell you, it was just opportunity. That's the opportunity to do something on the scale that I wanted to do, right? So I left the state of Nebraska just over 20 years ago. I moved out of the state. Because I'd done some great stuff in fundraising, but I wanted to go to a place, and I had lived in Atlanta for a year right out of college working for a private fraternity, and I was recruited to run the fraternity foundation in Atlanta. And I knew that by doing that, the opportunity was to create a nonprofit from scratch. Even though it was the oldest college social fraternity, never had a real full-time fundraising operation. I was able to go build something from scratch, had the capital to do it. And it was a network of high value relationships. These organizations are members are running Congress, Walter Cronkite. It was an opportunity to go interview Walter Cronkite for a magazine article. I was able to create programs and projects. So that was opportunity there. And then, I moved to Indiana the first time because it was an opportunity to be part of a startup. And then I moved to Boston because Boston was a hotbed of cause and social marketing efforts. And I could put myself, I knew that, the Wayne Puck quote that's Michael Scott likes to quote, it's where the puck's going to be, right? So I just have this sixth sense of knowing where energy's bubbling up and that I need to be there. I know that something's going to happen. And if I put myself in that spot, I could do something with that because I'm very comfortable with those messy, emergent environments. So that was kind of the belief in Boston. And then Atlanta was going back to Atlanta because it's been home. That was where my son had been born. And it just, it's a lower cost of living. But I knew that there wasn't much visibility of what was going on in Atlanta, but I knew that there was something that could happen because I'm coming off a Startup America partnership. I know that they've had some major exits before, but it just was kind of quiet. But I did the research. I realized there's stuff bubbling up. So I went and just put myself there with the belief. This is kind of the entrepreneurship. This is wild craziness of take the risk. I knew that I could figure out something. I could, once, when I went down to Atlanta the first time, I was running a foundation. And ever since then, I've been on my own or joined other startups. So I got really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was, kind of how and why I go places that one, I know I have a sense that something's happening and there I could do something there. And two is I'm comfortable with not knowing what that is. And that was the big thing. And that's really what brought me to Atlanta the second time. I guess the third time in my life was the fact that it's the capital of the South. And there's so many great companies there. I had some great relationships, and I just knew people knew who I was enough that I could find some sort of opportunity. And because of the networks and the relationships I've had, and that's everything I've ever been able to accomplish is because of connections I've made and did stuff great with them. And then, was able to then open doors and people say, hey, I know you did this project. Here's a great opportunity. I mean, that's how I got to run a 7 billion actions program, which was a worldwide initiative to celebrate the 7 billion population mark. And we were working with major companies, media companies like LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, as well as SAP, IBM, Mars. It was just a crazy thing doing it. But it was because prior to that, I was the co-strategist and the daily lead for Serial Palin Alaska TV show's digital operations, and so that made a mark there. But I got that because I made a connection here. So it's like every step of where I've gone is that I've got a relationship that gave me visibility, and I've done some interesting things. So.
Yeah. No, continuing along with all of those trends, like you said, it's relationship building. And with the skills that you've accumulated throughout the years, I'm sure that has helped you get those positions and put you in the right place to have those opportunities. So my next question was, in your experience working with all of those different cities, all of the startups and businesses, do you have any advice that you would give someone, like in the fact of what should they first do if they want to start a business or start a company? What's the first step that you would recommend they take?
So there's two questions. I mean, two questions I would have them ask themselves, right? The first question they should ask themselves is, which is the greater fear? Is it the fear of failure or the fear of regret of not pursuing an idea? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the knockout question is if you have a fear of failure, then don't even think about it because chances are you're going to fail on a startup, on a company. The status quo does not want new ideas, does not want things to change, does not want disruption. This collective status quo, there's too much writing on it. And so that's the first question, is it the fear of failure or the fear of regret? If it's the fear of regret, then the next thing they should be asking and looking at is, what's a problem out there that I see that no one's solving? And so I can solve it better, right? So entrepreneurs, if you're thinking of like, I want to open a pizza shop or a coffee shop or a bookstore, or I've got this online store, it doesn't, you're not trying to create a whole new category behind it. It's really, okay, what do I need? What are the fundamentals I need to put in place? Like, who's my customer? What's my solution for that customer? And how do I communicate that value proposition to that customer? How do I reach them and how do I sell that? So that's the thing. What we're doing with NMotion is the Accelerator Studio is focused on helping founders. So we recruit founders and we help them explore for a full month ideas that could become category creators. We want people who are seeing problems that haven't been defined in a way that if you define them correctly and you say, here's the boundaries, and you go solve it, you're the one that just all of a sudden created a whole new category, and now you're the category leader. And the math of that is category leaders make more money than everyone else in that category. So if you're going to go out there and carve a new territory, you better go out and define it, own it, and then just be the one that continually piles on top of it, so that when people say, oh, I have that problem, they're going to come to you, right? And so this first question is, where's your bigger fear? Second is, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and how can you solve it differently than others? And then it's the scale of how much disruption you're going to go. Are you going to go and open a pizza shop in a college town? That's a money maker. You just sneeze and you make money, right? Or are you trying to create a whole new way, a whole new technology to solve a problem on a very difficult thing, like Quantified Ag did with cattle tags using IoT, right? That's a way different proposition. Now they've done it and they've exited.
Mm-hmm. Right. So then kind of building on the social aspect, there's the kind of a two-part question that I have is, I know COVID is putting a bit of a hold on certain things, but were there any coffee shops that entrepreneurs hung out in, or pizza shops like you'd kind of?
Oh, goddamn. Yeah, that's the interesting thing is like when I was in Atlanta, my company was focused on building community in Atlanta, but I also was hired by Baton Rouge, University of Pittsburgh, to go and study other ecosystems. And so I would always go in, okay, if I'm going somewhere, where's the coffee shop people have their meetings, right? So in Atlanta, it was a Starbucks at 5th and Spring Street, right at the heart of Tech Square. You could like walk in and everyone was there back in the 20 teens. I think when you go into the beautiful thing is you look at communities, I would use meetup.com and figure out where are people holding the meetups when it comes to technology. And I would look at technology. We actually data scraped it and would do maps with heat maps of where were these events being held when it came to technology meetups, to hobby and craft meetups, as well as art and culture meetups, because those are all facets of community. And that's, it's interesting now. It's more digitally, like, okay, where can I go digitally? And that's, NMotion is a generator program, and Generator has done more deals in the Midwest than anyone else. And we're a growing company we're in over almost 25 cities now. And we're doing everything from startup acceleration to technology training, upskilling, to corporate innovation. And we've got all this beautiful ecosystem of programs which had to go digital. So we had Project North, which is our corporate innovation program, as well as on-ramp conferences. So we made them free, right? So we were able to just come online. We brought in the corporate innovators on these verticals of manufacturing, the cause impact space, we'll be doing ag tech again. We did it this year. And it was a chance for us to gather corporate innovators with startups who were in the same thing. So what's interesting is, in the pre-COVID world, it was, which coffee places do I need to go? Where the meetups need to be? Where's the common eating places to be at? Where's the bars that you would hang out? Silicon Valley, the Wagon Wheel was the kind of the place that people would go in. So that was the interesting thing. But now it's like, okay, who's hosting what online events that I can go and be a part of? So we've got a number of things that Generator does, and we're here in NMotion doing, but other great people like Powder Keg is doing in the Midwest as well. It's just find that. Those are the big things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was going to ask this earlier, but it applies now as well. But would you say that there is a point for an observational period when it comes to, you'd mentioned what's the first step people should do is they should find the problem. So when they move to a community, it sounds like it would be pretty important to take a pause, look at what problems are, rather than just assuming if there is, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's just, I think that's one of my superpowers is being able to observe things, right? I love watching people. I like watching ideas flow. I love, okay, where's things going on? I'm always fascinated by that, which then gives me enough data points to see where the patterns are. And I think the answer to your question is it depends on the person, right? What's the person's strengths? If they know themselves through their talents, whether it's like a Clifton Strengths or Builder Profile 10 or another psychometric, what makes you, and then leverage those strengths to build those connections. So for me, I'm very good at making connections with new people. So I like to go in, observe, but I also like to make a connection with people to figure out where's the high value relationships that I can make, who has something that can help me get connected to places and people that I wouldn't normally have. But that's just me, right? So, but I think observation is key. I mean, you got to come in, get the lay of the land. I think the biggest mistake I've seen people come in and think they have all the answers. The answer, no one has all the answers. I think we have principles that can lead us to answers. Every ecosystem is different, has different people, has different cultural, influences and perspectives and incentives. There's different companies here doing things. There's different talent level of, who has, they have deep engineering skills. Is there a specific sector that's been attracting talent? So observation allows you to kind of see, okay, what are the strengths? What are the gaps? And how does it match up with who I am and what can I do?
Mm-hmm. Fair. So then my other question relating to that observation, is there any co-working spaces that come to mind for you when it comes to like all the places that you've worked?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, here in Lincoln, Fuse Co-working is your kind of, I think the technology startup co-working space to be at. There's also Turbine Flats, which is another great community. They're, I would say, more hands-on creators, people doing stuff. There's a symbiotic relationship between Turbine Flats and Fuse Co-working here in Lincoln, which is nice. Atlanta has just exploded. It was a couple OG co-working spaces. One, Strongbox West, was great. Hypopotamus, when I was running it, was a free co-working space, but we turned it into a digital publication. And then I created a co-working collaborative space, which is now still alive, called Tech Square. ATL Social Club is its current name. But there's, you got the WeWorks of the world that came in. You have Rome. Like Atlanta is a major city, so it's like lots of stuff. But Lincoln, I think Lincoln's great to have both Turbine Flats and Fuse, and the fact that there's back and forth between the flow.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's very interesting too. So we're in a situation, we're in COVID, we're in a pandemic, but it's insurmountable the amount of technology innovation that we've experienced. I guess like more of a social question, since you're very relationship based, do you think there's been a disconnect over this time period with not being able to quite see everyone in person at co-working spaces or at coffee shops? Some are open and some are socially distanced, but have you noticed anything personally, whether that's been a plus with Zoom conferences or a negative with not having that natural human interaction?
I think this is probably the most fascinating aspect of the past year. The fact that we had all these technologies at our hands and we weren't using them to the degree that we are now.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been odd for you to say, "Can we schedule a video conference?" And I want to do a podcast. I mean, it wouldn't have been weird. It would just been, well, most people would have said, "I want to fly in, want to do this in person," right? But we don't have that ability. Mm-hmm. So until we get the vaccine to the point we need to, until we can get COVID under control in the United States, I think we won't, until we get back into, okay, what flow can we have? The perniciousness of COVID is the fact that it is at our core. We are social through and through, as I said earlier. We want to be together. We get energy off of each other. And we're always thinking of people, even when we're by ourselves, we're thinking of people. We just think of people. So I think that the advantages, the upsides and downsides is interesting. I think certainly we don't know the emotional and mental wear and tear and cost. It's certainly, there's depression and anxiety that's off the roof, and that it's always been there, but it's even more so now. And I have a different perspective. What did I do for the pandemic? I went and shot a documentary traveling across 14 states and interviewed 36 different people around how COVID was disrupting them, right? So I got to see it through their eyes. I've been on the road to Atlanta a couple times and seen some people. So I've had my travel. I've had an epic road trip or two this year. So but I do know people who have been traveling 100 days a year who haven't done any traveling yet, right? So what's that going to do? Short and sweet answer here for you is the fact that this has allowed for us to get more people to adopt technologies that takes away the reliance on time, synchronicity, and physical proximity.
Mm-hmm.
How many people we know this year hosted a Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah gathering on Zoom versus how many did that last year? Right? That's a huge, and now all of a sudden we can use video conferencing. I think we got to understand, as a Art of the Gathering book, Priya Patel had a great interview with Brene Brown around this, of how utilization. Zoom is not the host. Zoom is a contextless space. You, Caitlin, are the host, and you can bring this together. Creative use of chat rooms is great. Creative uses of breakout rooms is great. But what we have to understand is this Zoom experience has allowed for us to reach people that wouldn't have been part of conversations. How many people watched their grandchild's performance this year because it was live streamed? Isn't that awesome? How many? But at the same time, we haven't had the chance to celebrate funerals of people and births, and there's all that heartbreak. But I think we don't know where all this is going to fall out. I think there is a cost. There's a huge benefit, because I think going forward, it's going to be a hybrid of where are the advantages of digital and what's the advantage of in real life. A very practical thing for you is that NMotion, we have just invested $500,000 into 5 founding teams, and I never met any of them in person. We had 165 applicants. We did 3 rounds of interviews via Zoom, a 20-minute interview, a 45-minute interview, and then if you made it to the final 30-minute interview. So that's not a lot of time to spend with people. We didn't have the benefit of having them fly in, get to know them over dinner. So we're having to learn how to build trust and discern via a video 2D screen in ways that we normally would rely on 3D in person. So, to make a $500,000 investment over 3 Zoom calls blows my mind, right? Just blows my mind that we did that. And now we're building and working 100% in the virtual environment with them. I just came back from Atlanta via Austin via Kansas City because 3 of our 5 founders are located there. That's the other thing. We are able to conduct this program. We did not force it in person. The expectation is them to move to Lincoln and build company here and have company structure here. But now it's allowed for us to realize, hey, maybe we could take the networked approach. And companies don't locate in the same place anymore. They're spread out. So I think this is really opening a lot of opportunity to experiment and push through and really utilize technology differently. But I think to your question around social interaction and people and how this is going to change and how it's impacted, I couldn't have told you that I was going to celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas on Zoom, and that I was going to conduct business on Zoom, and that it actually works. You can do that, right? That's pretty amazing.
No, you bring up a good point. My co-host and I actually have never been in the same room before. We've been working together since the summer, but we have both reflected in our yearly reflection episode, that we've really grown as people after knowing each other. We feel like we've really helped each other as like interviewing, and through this podcast, we really feel like we've helped people, and we like to hope so, at least. Like you said, you're talking about investments, which is intimidating just a little bit, but no, the relationship building between Nick and I has been incredible as well. And I can relate to, as well as like Thanksgiving and Christmas over Zoom. I think it brings up a good point for people who are, split family, like, they go to the dad's side or the mom's side for Christmas, just every other year, depending on how your family does it. But I think that also shows with the Zoom capability that you don't have to completely miss out on Christmas, depending on what off year it is too.
You're right. I mean, I think most people have had the benefit of having physical proximity for these things on the social level, but there have always been people who haven't had that opportunity. And how do they survive? And it goes back to the 3 levers I was talking about when you build community. The density comes through your physical spaces that you occupy, the media that this Zoom call is a media, right? So is that, and it's events. So getting people on in-person events, now digital events. It's those are the 3 things, and those are, you put the core of your family experiences. Those are how you do it. I mean, how many people have group text messages and Facebook groups and other ways of communicating together as a family? It's been interesting to see that acceleration because of COVID.
Well, I also like from a comedic point of view is you really can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
Essentially because well I just happen to notice that some of the people in my life who aren't super technologically skilled, they've really grown in their Zoom and the computer, and it's like, how do I get my camera working? Well, I don't have to teach them anymore. They get it right away now. And I just say that lightheartedly and comedically, but I know some of my
It's really, it's because you have to want to do it. You want to learn, right?
yeah.
People, we can always learn something. We have plasticity in our mind. This fluidness, that we can always learn new stuff. We just have to have a reason to want to. And this forced that. The other thing too is like the clunkiness of technology. If you get it down to the user interface is easy to use, like Apple is so good, it's so easy to use. Zoom got to the point where it's, there's some clunkiness, but it's easy to use and it's reliable. And so I think the will, along with ease of use and reliability, makes it easier for people to adopt this stuff.
Mhm. Absolutely. So when it comes to whether this was in person, because I like to think one day we will get back to being in person at coffee shops and
Oh,
co-working spaces.
well, yeah,
We'll get there in the hybrid future. Where would you
well,
suggest?
just in time to where we fuse into the matrix and we have been just live always in virtual reality. I mean, people are
Absolutely.
doing that now, like with Vive and stuff. You can be creating your own worlds, and that's something Kevin Kelly, I think, in his book "What Technology Wants" and the 12 Inevitable Trends, and another book he wrote. There's good stuff in there. Like that's coming. It's already happening. Look at Roblox. I mean, you look at the artists who are. I mean, with Lil Nas X doing his concert in Roblox, and Travis Scott doing it in the world gaming environment. It's amazing what that's already happening. So wait till that happens.
Yeah, when we realize this is just a hologram shell and we'll finally reach higher sentience.
And the philosophers will say, "We told you so."
Okay. Right. So when it comes to the future, how do people learn about upcoming events, whether this be through digital and then one day through person from your experience? Where can people go to learn
Yeah, I
more?
think, there's in terms of Lincoln, the Lincoln Chamber, Startup Lincoln is a good place. I think there's publications. Silicon Prairie News is good about letting people know ahead of time. For us, nmotion.co is our website, and we'll put little call outs to what happens, and especially when our programmatic stuff. But I think that's actually a great question. Where was it versus where will it be? Who's going to take that responsibility to really say, here's what's happening? And I think the starting point would be the Facebook pages and the social media accounts for Startup Lincoln, for the chamber here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I think Omaha's got a plethora of good stuff up there going on too.
Mm-hmm. So this one is a little bit of a tough question, but we like to ask it anyway. Do you have any like of the most notable startups from the communities you've worked with?
The notable ones, I mean, I think the one everyone knows here in Lincoln is Huddle,
Okay.
HUDL, right? So just an amazingly great story of University of Nebraska students coming through what's now the Rake School and creating out a whole new way for athletes in college, and coaches to capture performance in practice as well as games. Huddle is doing great. We've got a lot of great sports marketing here in Nebraska. That because of the University of Nebraska athletic department has always been cutting edge. Husker Power and strengths, they developed out strength conditioning, and then also how to market through Husker Television. So it's natural to me for them to see that you're going to create companies like that. We have sports performance companies that are here. From NMotion, the ecosystem here, I mentioned Quantified Ag, which just sold to Merck Animal Health. We have Realm 5, Leverage RX, Live By. These are companies that are doing very well and growing up and out to where they need to be. Noble Health is another great one. And just a slew of other great companies here in the Lincoln community that are doing good stuff. I think Lincoln's interesting because of the physical density, but also the social network density. Omaha and Lincoln are, to me, to drive to my parents' house in Omaha is just like my house to my office in Atlanta. So it's like, that's easy drive. And Omaha's there's a really better connectivity between Omaha and Lincoln now. And that's one of the things, I'm definitely excited about helping accelerate that as we get back out into the post-COVID world. Mm-hmm. But those are the companies here in Lincoln I'd really point you at. We at NMotion and Generator had a chance, but there's also other companies that have come through our G-Beta program. You got Oak Barn Beef, which does dry aged beef that you get boxed to your house. We got Drink Tiga is doing great work. Their powdered drink. You've got Sapan. We've got a hydroponic company that building flowers. It's good stuff. That's the best part about being part of NMotion and the programs we've helped create, but we also accelerate. And then being part of Generator, got the entire national network of companies. So it's hard to answer your question, Caitlin, but I would say that's how I'd answer it.
Absolutely. Yep. My co-host and I know it's a tough one, but we like to just kind of see what comes off the top of your head. And so thank you for giving me like that detailed answer, even though it was a tough one. So we're kind of wrapping up soon. So I was going to ask you, are there any news outlets, any podcasts or blogs that you'd recommend for people to listen to learn how they can do startups in their cities and communities?
That's aside from Mug News, got it. To supplement your Mug News content consumption, I love the Nebraska Made podcast. I think that's a really great podcast. It's really helping me understand the story behind some of the iconic companies that are here, as well as learning about some of the companies I didn't even know about that since I've been gone for 20 years. So Nebraska Made podcast is a great one. Regionally, I pay attention to Startland News out of Kansas City, Clay and Milk out of Iowa, and Silicon Prairie News out of Omaha. Those are things that those are good sources to look at for if you're looking this part of the Midwest Plains region. I'd look at that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you for that update. So then, do you have any final or parting thoughts for the listeners?
Yeah, here's the big thing is I think about what happened after the 2008-2009 financial crisis. And that was where a number of people, kind of got the opportunity to shift and do a whole new thing that they, their career and industry kind of cratered. So they went to different things. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of grassroots stuff. And I think the listeners here need to be thinking, what can everyone in their own communities do that can be founder-led? People who have founded companies leading initiatives to gather people so that there can be more of grassroots, bottom-up ideation and creation. And I'm thinking like, unconferences, that model of unconferences. I'm talking hackathons, idea pitches. I'm talking about startup weekends. These are, things for getting makers together, maker fairs. Even to the point of like getting fermentation, people who like to ferment food and drinks and stuff, get them together and celebrate that. How can you get hobbyists and craftsmen and craftwomen to come together? I should say craft people, come together alongside artists and startups. So you can get the folks that are creating in different ways and allow them to help define kind of a self-organized swarm for a weekend, for a defined period. Because I can tell you here in Lincoln, pointing back to the companies that have succeeded, they came out of things like that in 2011, 2012, 2013. So we have an opportunity to come out of COVID, create an environment. What are we going to do to create an environment that allows for individuals to say, you know what, I have a job here, but I've always wanted to do this. Give me the space and the constraints to do it, and then the support to do it. And I think that's the best thing everyone should be thinking about that they can do is creating founder-led, bottom-up, grassroots idea and challenges that allow for people to take a swing at creating something new. And you'll see new nonprofits, new startups, new ideas, and community initiatives come out of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott, thank you so much for all your detailed answers and the input that you have for all ecosystem builders, in addition to entrepreneurs who are trying to do their startups. That was all the questions I had for you. So I wanted to thank you so much for coming onto the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to seeing more of these episodes.
Absolutely. Thanks for plugging us.
Absolutely.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from the person building it, I'm going to link back up with Caitlin to clarify some jargon and take a deeper dive into this community.
Caitlin, how was your interview with Scott?
I had a great time. It went a little longer, as you could have seen, but I really think we covered a ton of material that was worth keeping in. I just couldn't find anything I wanted to edit out.
Amazing. So I've actually met Scott recently. Right when he moved to Lincoln, I had a meeting with him, and we kind of just talked podcasting and everything about Lincoln's community. So yeah, I'm very interested to kind of get in the weeds and get your impression of Scott. What was your biggest takeaway from the conversation?
Well, something that stood out to me was to be open to opportunities. So Scott, it was a huge trend was that he was very relationship based, well, building relationships in addition to building the more technical side of ecosystem building. He just really drove home about making those connections with people, making shared experiences, and taking the time to have conversations with people. And as you saw, in the interview, he's worked with in Atlanta, Baton Rouge, he's been all over the place. And I just thought that was really fascinating as someone who travels, and not right now, of course, because of COVID, but as a traveler myself and getting to experience more of those opportunities. I loved that. I loved having those conversations with him.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's also good to get a sort of a worldly perspective throughout your life that when you're in situations, you can, I think, empathize with others easier and sort of understand other people's perspectives. So like I just said, in my conversations with Scott, he does not get very jargony, and he's very much a down to earth dude. Was there any jargon that you had to look up after?
No, it's funny you bring that up because I was going to say, no, I didn't. I didn't have any jargon to look up. But then on the contrary, because I didn't want to leave you hanging without a question. But
okay. Thank you for adapting.
To take up the jargon section of this piece was that he mentioned something that jogged my memory with an interview I had with Ezzy Redwood. And so something he brought up, and I thought it was contrary, the saying failure's not an option. Well, he kind of brought up the alternative side, which is failure is an option and it's a probability. And as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a ecosystem builder, you need to overcome it. If you want to succeed, you need to accept that failure is an option and find a way to persevere through it. As he had kind of said something similar along the lines of sink or swim. So I found that as an interesting trend to keep up with as we're meeting with ecosystem builders. And then as an interviewer and then as listeners, we're picking up on some more context clues of this is a trend of needing to keep moving forward.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's just a good, something good to remember regardless of if you're an entrepreneur or not. It's just an inspiring message regardless. Was there anything else, Caitlin, before we close this episode out?
Yeah, I guess my last minute thoughts, things that I took away from this maybe was a bit on a personal note, but he mentioned a ton with interpersonal communication. So he worked with Cause Shift, which works in business leadership.
Okay.
And I took a bunch of business leadership classes in college. And at the time when I was in the college, it seemed like it was a soft skill and something that wasn't as valued as it would be to have more of a technical skill. I'm right for the listeners, I'm using quote unquotes, hand signals. I guess I should do that. But basically it feels very validating to understand that having those soft skills, having that ability to connect with humans rather than just being able to run a Word document, Excel, those are what are going to help you build those relationships, build those communities. So as an individual who those are my skills, those are some of my strong sets, it just felt super validating to be able to continue to progress as a person. So
yes, yeah. And I also think it's interesting, Caitlin, kind of a common theme in all of your interviews is people who have taken an artistic perspective and have done something else with this. I don't know if you were able to get to it in the interview, but Scott is directed a series of a docu-series in COVID and traveled around and is a part-time filmmaker, like outside of being an ecosystem builder, that you've also talked about. You've also talked with people about like their backgrounds in literature or theater, and like you also are like an artist yourself. So it is kind of interesting to see that as we've gone around and have interviewed people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we mentioned, and I'm trying to remember if we mentioned this on screen or off screen,
Yeah,
but
classic.
did talk about his involvement. He worked on some film sets in Georgia, and he did mention his little docu-series, which, I guess that could have gone under things that I wanted to look up. So I do want to go check out his docu-series. So I love the opportunity that we get to have in talking with people that are in our areas of interest.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have much else on my end. If you want to read us out, go for it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder Podcast, which is a product of Mug.News and hosted by myself, Nick Kastner, and my co-host, Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions after today's episode, please connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share it with your friends. We release episodes every single Wednesday morning, so hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a beat.
See you, folks.